So quick overview. What do you guys, the best way to interview an A player, best way to just to identify somebody is, of course, and we all know this, is to have worked with that person before. And it's really the only reliable way to know if someone is an A player or not. Second best way to know if someone's an A player is if you've worked with someone before who is an A player and then they vouch for someone being an A player, then that person might be an A player if you really trust that person. Third best way is an extensive interview, and we'll talk about that. And the fourth best way, and really just the worst way, is to rely on the resume. The resume is there to sell you, and it's just not a very good way to do that. I don't think there's a lot of correlation between A players and schools or A players in companies that they've worked in, et cetera. I'm sure Google has more A players than another random company that's out there, but the majority of their employees are not A players. Harvard has a lot of great people. They probably have more A players than another random school, but the majority of their students are not A players. So you need to really identify people. You need to really go out and go look for them, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is a really bad slide. This is what happens when you make your slides at 2 a.m. But I just want to talk about a couple of kind of strategies for kind of identifying A players in the interview process. So one way I think is a really important way to do it is to get someone to teach you something, teach you anything. This guy over here is Grant Lee. He's a recent hire that we have in the sales department at Rapleaf. He is a chess master. I am a very, very, very bad chess player, but in our interview, I got him to teach me chess. Now, sales, like most things, you have to communicate very fluidly, and you have to be able to teach people very complex things very quickly. In a very quick amount of time, he was able to make me a much better chess player and to kind of teach me kind of the overviews of chess, which is a fairly complex game. So that's the type of person you want. You want someone who can teach you something, who can communicate something that's very, very complex, and to kind of distill it and make you smarter about that. So get someone to teach you their hobby or teach you some other type of very, very complex thing. Another thing is I would ask them very insightful questions about things that they should know a lot about. A lot of people focus on things that they shouldn't know much about. I would say get them to teach you something, get them to ask them very, very deep questions about things they know a lot about. If this person was a physics major, ask some really deep questions about string theory so that you can get them to teach you something and that you can learn about something. If they were a physics major and you were a history major and you know more about physics than they do, you should not hire this person. So get them to really kind of get them to get you there. I would also ask insanely hard questions. Ask questions that get them to kind of think about the process, get them on the whiteboard, get you talking about things, and get them thinking about things that are not common. I would not ask a question that they've heard a gazillion times before. I think questions like, what's your biggest mistake or something like that isn't a good question. If you want to get out how they're improving, I would ask them kind of a question about how they're improving. Like a question might be, what's an area that 5 years ago you were really bad at that now you're really good at? And then really try to delve into why, how did they get better? How did they learn to get better? What did they do to get better, et cetera, so you can see how this person improves over time. The other great thing about asking hard questions is that I found that their success rate of accepting a job goes up dramatically when people, when their questions are really, really hard. Essentially, if they're getting less than 50% of what you're asking, then you should probably see an over 90% success rate if they actually get through and you give them the offer. I mean, it's a little bit of a psychological thing, but if someone actually gets through an extremely hard process that's extremely long and extremely arduous, they're more likely to think that it was worth their time. The other thing is don't ask the same question to everybody. I would tailor the questions to each person. And I would also be very careful about brain teasers. Most people have heard brain teasers before. They're not really usually very good about teaching somebody something new. And they're also quite rote. So if you're going to ask a brain teaser, I would ask something that's actually that someone can relate to, that isn't something that someone has heard before, and that somehow actually teases out some sort of interesting things about how people think rather than, you know, how many batteries there are in the U.S. or basically any question that McKinsey would ask, I wouldn't ask. So anything like that is just like everyone knows how to answer those questions. And if they don't know, it's just because like they haven't studied some sort of case study thing. It doesn't really tell you much about how good a person this is. And if someone wrote a thesis in college, or someone did like anything where they spent just an insane amount of time building something, I would ask them a lot of deep questions about that. Get them to show you how excellent they are. Here's a couple things I wouldn't do. I wouldn't ask many questions regarding your own company. I would ask them similar questions about past companies or about a fictitious company, but not about your own. It's just unfair. You know a ton about your company, they don't. So I would ask them things that are about things that they know about so they can demonstrate their knowledge. And I wouldn't just give questions to people that they could just solve. Get them to interact with you, make it a conversation, get them to talk with you. And I also wouldn't talk more than 25% of the time. This is probably a good tactic for any meeting that you're in, but especially in an interview, it's probably a good idea not to talk more than 25%. So essentially what I'm doing right now, you should not do in an interview situation. And lastly, I don't have too many criteria when you're hiring. Too many people, they just have like gazillion criteria when they're hiring, and it makes it really hard to distill what are the key things that you want. I think when you're hiring, you should really work it down to 3 things that you want. It could be whatever it is, but you should have 3 things, and everyone in your organization should know exactly what those 3 things are. And you should all be judging people on those 3 things. If they don't hit those 3 things, you don't hire them. Now, if they hit the 3 things, doesn't mean you hire them. There could be a lot of external factors, but you should focus on those 3 things. I think it's kind of like if you're searching for an employee, it's kind of like searching for a spouse, right? You can't have like a gazillion list. You're just never going to find one, or it's not going to work out. You should have 3 things. Number 1 thing, you know, when you're looking for a spouse is probably gender, right? Gender is probably really important when you're looking for a spouse. And there's probably 2 other things that are more that are more unique to you. Here's the 3 things that we look for in Rapleaf, and I don't think these are the 3 things that you should necessarily look for. We look for people that are scary smart, and so we interview a lot around just how are they scary smart. We look for people that get things done, and so we interview around get things done. And then we also look for people who are nice and friendly. That's the criteria that basically very few companies actually really care about. Most people do look for the first 2, but they're looking for things like experience or other things in the 3rd one. We don't value that as much. And that's basically it. So we'll have Matt's going to come up here, and I think he's going to talk about how you find people and then how you close them.